Welcome to hour number 2 on a Monday with hashtag Daily K's host, Peter B. Tired of just scratching the surface of Korea? Want to get deep in the weeds?
We unpack everything about Korea through its history on
Now and Then
with David.
Why don't we have a look-see at the script? It does say something here, and I think I've read it on your first ever appearance, and this is maybe the second time. Let go of any preconceived ideas that history is boring and difficult. Every Monday, we'll learn about various parts of Korean history linked to everyday events, movies, and more. That kind of sounds accurate still.
Sounds more accurate than scratching the surface or unpacked everything. There's mistakes all over this, Pete.
Do you know, I
read the script.
I definitely typed that out. And I realised the unpacked bit was a mistake, and I haven't bothered correcting that. I have never noticed that it didn't say scratching, and it said scratting.
It says scratching, yeah.
It's my brain filling in the blanks. Yeah. Well, at least it's still working up there. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing really well. I'm happy, healthy. I'm good.
Did you get jogging over the weekend?
I did. I did it. It's cold outside.
Yes.
So it requires a lot of effort. It's minus, 6-7 out here, but the wind out in the mountains is really something.
Oh,
so
no.
I did wrap up warm. I got out there and I did like 6.5 kilometers.
Wow.
But yeah, sometimes you feel like you're doing well. You're not just at running, but in general. Yeah, I'm in a good place at the moment.
Well, that's good. I'm trying to be fitter because I did a 건강검진, which is quite common here, like the checkup that
Health
you get.
check. Yeah.
And they do your blood tests and stuff. And I got the thing I get every time is you're a little bit overweight. 과체중. You're not obese, but look out for that. But this time it accompanied with some high liver something or others, and they were like, "You really need to exercise."
You've been drinking, Pete, have you?
I don't drink a lot, not at all. But I got on the exercise bike now. It's been sitting in the balcony as a kind of showpiece and a little clothes horse as well. So now I'm on it, and I sometimes think of you when I'm on that and think, should I be outside actually jogging? But I'm like, I like watching TV while I'm exercising in the warmth. I don't feel it does as much, though. Today's topic, though, not so much about child poverty, and I did mention my clothing was a little hint. It was completely coincidental, I will admit, but it's got something to do with my red sleeves.
That's exactly what we're talking about. This new 사극, like a historical period drama, would be in South Korea, called The Red Sleeve. That finished kind of recently.
Yeah.
Starring Lee Junho of 2 p.m. He's done his military service, and now he's doing his acting in his music, as well as Lee Se-young. And they won loads of awards at the MBC 2021 Drama Awards.
Yeah.
The drama itself finished with like 17% viewer ratings, which is really high. But more than that, it's been on the internet. People have been talking about it. It's been part of blogs. It's been part of social media events. And it might not sort of get the international attention that things like Squid Game or Itaewon Class get, but it's been really big in South Korea. And I've noticed that if you ask sort of South Korean person about this, you were saying that your wife even, their eyes light up and they know it.
Absolutely. And we did it for actually last Tuesday's language learning segment with Korean on Me. We do some acting from a drama and we teach the phrases. Because it's so popular here, our writer chose it out. And my wife was addicted to the short clips, which a lot of people consume now. They maybe don't sit down for the whole hour episode. They'll just look at the highlights, which are maybe 3 minutes here, 2 minutes there.
Right.
And she got so deep in the weeds, to borrow our phrase from the opening, in terms of going on the internet and looking at the facts from this drama, because it's based on real people, right? But not maybe, as with every drama out there, it seems completely accurate.
So you already did this last Tuesday. I'll go.
We didn't go into depth of the cultural implications whatsoever. I can't remember what we learned. We maybe learned things like, am I asking you an obvious question because I'm asking you if you want a son or not? That was one of the phrases I think we learned.
Useful. You never know when you might be able to use that in everyday life. I'd like a carton of milk, some eggs, and do you want a son?
Yes, there you go. So, I don't know how much of the plot we went into. We did mention, because the scene we were playing was with the king and with his concubine.
Yeah.
So that was a thing back then, right? And that's what this drama kind of focuses in on, right? The relationship there.
It's a romance story, and it's one of those forbidden love stories which are so popular, melodramatic. This forbidden love that's not allowed to happen. That's kind of hard to do in a modern setting these days.
Yes.
Forbidden love, because now love transcends race and class and gender and things like that. We've had all of those stories, which I think is why the Red Sleeve or even Sarang Bushijak, Crash Landing on You, that forbidden love between North and South. So it's a forbidden love between a king and his concubine, but it's a story, I think, that most Koreans will know, because they will know of Jongjo and they will know of Uibin, because this is about the third time that this story has been dramatized.
Oh, already? Okay.
Already. So in 2007, you have Wind of the Palace, and that was a really big one. There have been others as well, but it's the characters of Jongjo, who's the king who grows up. It's kind of entrenched in Korea. They'll study about it in history. You know, like, for example, we'll hear of Henry VIII.
Yeah, a lot.
And even if we don't have a great historical knowledge, we'll have ideas and where they all kind of fit in. So for Korean people watching this, it's telling a familiar story where they already know the backgrounds, but they want to see it play out again. They want to see these new stars adopt the roles that they've seen people take many times before.
Yeah, my wife was telling me, and she's no history expert, but she says, like, King Jongjo was like one of the last great kings of the Joseon dynasty. And, you know, he was a very romantic king. These are the things that she's picked up, you know, from just like pop culture and whatnot. I wonder how accurate they are. I see here we've got the king's eulogy in the script. Is this an actual historical thing?
Yeah. Before we go into the eulogy, I want to jump ahead and just go into Jongjo's father, the king's father. So why it's well known, why he's perhaps the last great king, is because this king, his father, Crown Prince Sado, is perhaps one of the most tragic royal family stories in South Korean or in Korean history. Crown Prince Sado was put inside a grain or a rice chest, we'll show you a picture on the thing, by his father, and left in there to die.
That is a tragic story.
It is a tragic story.
That's been dramatized as well.
That's been dramatized many, many times. It's been told. And for Crown Prince Sado, there was obviously some psychological or mental problems going on, very violent, causing huge disruptions in the royal palace. But the father couldn't kill his son.
Yeah.
And so rather than sort of put him to kill him, he put him in a rice chest and just left him there and essentially killed him.
He perished, right?
And so I know this might be a bit confusing, but Sado's son is Jongjo from the drama.
Yes.
And so he grows up knowing that his family, his father is being killed.
Sure.
What can he do? He doesn't want to fall into the same traps as his father. He wants to restore reputation. He wants to overcome those hurdles. And so I think that's why the story of Jongjo really resonates sometimes.
Well, that makes it all the more interesting, that direct family link to one of the most infamous incidents, right, in the royal family. And then we can do this before the song break to maybe set things up. This is Jongjo's actual eulogy to Uibin.
Yeah.
Oh, from historical records.
Yeah, it is written there, and people have analysed and tried to interpret it. You know, does it really speak of a deep love? Does it just speak of sort of a final letting go of your concubine? But just to read some. So Uibin Songshi, she passed away September 14th, 1786. And Jongjo's eulogy is said to have read like this.
Okay.
You knew exactly how a concubine was supposed to be. Anyone smarter or more brilliant than you would be a saint. Although your rank was high, you knew how to behave and talk and how to be frugal. For your exemplary conducts, you deserve the blessings and fortunes, but even before the tears you shed, when we lost our son had dried, you've passed away. I will seek my solace from the grief that you and I can never meet again.
Oh.
From this, people have sort of played out this romanticized relationship, you know.
From this nugget of history.
From these nuggets of history. And I think it can be interpreted in very many ways. You know, he's still treating her as a concubine. He's still saying you were frugal and, you know, you knew your rank, you did these things. But from that has evolved this great love story that transcends class and rank.
Wow. I wonder which of our listeners have seen this. What do you think about it as well?
Welcome to Arirang Radio.
If you are in Jeju,
88.7 in Jeju City,
88.1 in Seogwipo City,
101.9 in the Daejeong area,
Arirang Radio.
Lots of messages coming in as well. Siska saying, so many Saguk dramas, the historical ones, to catch up to lately. And when Juno versus Taegyeon Saguk dramas on air together, I watched the Taegyeon one first because it's quite funny. Taegyeon is from 2 p.m. or Big Bang? I can't remember. But if they're from the same group and having a drama on at the same time, that's a cool little rivalry, I feel.
You know, sometimes when in academia and the Hallyu professors, I speak to Ikyu Tak and things like this, and they talk about the crossover effects from K-pop into other mediums.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm doing live research here, listening to how these people will have fans, they'll be fans of artists and then go and watch the dramas and things like that. The
Absolutely.
crossover, it's real, ladies and gentlemen.
You just mentioned a blast from the past. Ikyu Tak used to be our weekend guest here on our show many years ago.
Right?
Is he still doing well?
Yeah, I spoke to him on the podcast. He's a good lad. I
He's
really enjoy him.
lovely.
He seems to be doing very well in that field at the moment.
Being an academic in that field. Oh, that's such a jog of the memory. Glad to hear he's well. You got some more messages.
Small world, isn't it?
Yes.
Silver Granny and Grumpy Gnome, who's experiencing a lot of snow this morning. I got a message. It says, gosh, I think that might have been worse than putting him to death, talking about Prince Sado putting in that thing. And Sherry Russell joins in with, wow, talk about dysfunctional families. Yeah, if you thought you had problems, you don't have rice chest problems.
Yeah, but the way you described it, put it in a different perspective for me. Yeah, like directly putting him to death, that would be, terrible. But putting him in the chest and just leaving him, well, that's a different matter.
It would have been terrible, not only because it would be infanticide, but in the Joseon dynasty, which was based on Confucianism, the relationship between the father and the son, that particular relationship is really, really important. And so it was this huge thing about how to solve that problem. And so that was seen as a way of circumnavigating Confucian traditional relationships.
Yeah, like a loophole almost, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And Stacey saying, is that real life? That is real life. I don't think that comes out in this drama. Like, that's the background to Chongjo, right? And Donna saying, yeah, the Sado story is true. And Hartley saying, is this kind of like the Korean version of Titanic, this like ill-fated romance? I suppose you could draw some comparisons, but
I'm not as familiar with Titanic as I am with Hamlet. But this idea of your father being killed by an uncle or an elder relative, and then what you do in that existential journey to overcome it. I perhaps see more of Hamlet in it. And the Sado story with Jongjo, well, eventually King Jongjo and his father, that is covered in the start of this drama. I watched a bit of the first few episodes to get an idea.
Oh, interesting. They set the scene like that.
They do explain it for you to show why Jongjo was who he was. Jackie Wong says it's tragic, but Sado was a cruel being. The king had no choice. And Tropic Girl says that is an awful thing to do to your son or anyone who he would have lost his mind before his life. And I think both of those comments are correct, because now with the advancements into psychology, into psychotherapy, into our understanding of mental conditions, it seems to be clear, I can't speak with any authority, that Crown Prince Sado had some issues that need to be dealt with. You know, it wasn't a spirit that possessed him, but there was something there.
Yes, medicine hadn't come that far at all in those days. Do you know, David, I hope you can solve this conundrum, because when we were doing the red sleeve last week, we were debating, like, there must be some meaning behind it. Maybe the red sleeve denotes your class or something like that. What is why is it called the red sleeve, this thing?
Absolutely, and we'll show a picture on the screen as well, so you can actually see, rather than Pete's red, you see what the court ladies look like with their red sleeves. There you can see them. Now, in this drama, and in the book that it's based on, it was based on a book, the reason given is that those that wear a red sleeve are women that belong to the king. So they symbolize the king's possession. And if you watch these dramas, the king will always walk around in the dark red robe. So the red was the color of royalty. So the women wearing these signified that they were possession of the king, which, if you think about that in modern,
it doesn't fly anymore. It's not romantic.
It's a little bit strange. If you look into the actual history, some historians will say that this idea of Hongsu and beyond, it didn't always refer to a king's woman.
Okay.
Or a concubine. Rather, it referred to sort of just a beautiful woman. So if you look at old prominent writers of the time like Lee Gubo and Isek, they would use this word outside of the court elements just to describe a woman's beautiful appearance. So
Hongsu.
Yeah.
Hong being the red character.
Being the red part. So did it apply to that's part of this story, and in that drama and in that book, that's what it means. More broadly, is it correct? Some people seem to disagree with that.
Okie dokie. In terms of court ladies themselves, have they been around since time immemorial here in Korea?
Really interesting. So if we look at the Daejeon Hwaetong, which is like the law book of the time, we can see that the court ladies, they were selected from, I'm going to say the word public slaves, which is gongnobi.
Okay.
And the court people, they would go out into the villages outside of these beautiful palaces, and they would select people that would then come in and work in the palace. They would these women would normally come into the palace around 7 or 8 years old, and there they would be called egi nain. And that refers to sort of like a young or a baby woman of the court. They would go in at the age of about 7 or 8.
Wow.
They would then sort of grow up. Once they reach the age of 18, they would achieve the rank of nain, a court lady. And then there were various ranks amongst them. So it wasn't just there was one, but if you watch the dramas, even this one, The Red Sleeve, you will see these women with different clothes, different ranks, different ways they talk to each other. So it was very structured inside.
Wow. And we're seeing some photos, some actual photos of court ladies from back in the day.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, this black and white photography really brings it home. Because again, this would not really fly in modern society in this day and age.
It was just the way that sort of South Korea was. And this is during the Joseon dynasty, which runs 1392 till, you can say 1910 or 1897, but at the start of the 20th century, essentially that's when it ran. So they would be brought into the palace, and there they would start sort of serving the king.
Okay, and they, like you said, had ranks in between them. There was a kind of organization of court ladies?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So most of Joseon dynasty was done on this thing called punge, which was your rank or system. And you know, in South Korean society today, Pete, rank and position and title is really important. If I'm sending an email to someone, I'm like, is that a 사장님? Is that a 박사님? Is that just a she? You have to sort of understand where people are.
Sure. I think it's more important when you talk to them, because you address them by their title like the whole time, not their name.
Not their name. That's right. Yeah, 맞습니다. Yeah. But it was the same in the Joseon dynasty. And so the women inside, they were part of this thing called this Naemyeongbu. And all of the women inside the Joseon court, they were managed by the queen.
Oh, really? She was at the top of this tree?
She was at the top of this kind of internal organization of all the women. And so it would be her job. And remember, the women inside, they would have to be sort of doing work and studying and things like that. They had this privilege to be inside the palace, but also various responsibilities. Also, it's worth noticing that the queen would have had some influence inside the court. She would have, been a powerful figure. It's not like a first lady today who's more symbolic.
Sure.
She would have had direct general influence. So if the king is away, questions would come to the queen.
Oh, wow.
Because of the concubine system, just before we take a break, because of the concubine system, the king would have various women, various children through all of these.
Sure.
And that creates all these stories of mystery and intrigue. And so the idea of a jealous queen who is then, threatened by young concubines giving children to the king, that becomes a source of great drama and fiction in Korean movies and books and such forth.
Yeah, I'm guessing there might have been some instances of truth, just by the nature of human beings, maybe, but I'm sure it's been dramatized a lot. I think even in Kingdom, the royal heroine of that is one of those who is born not of the first wife of the king.
That's the really important thing.
Yeah, concubine.
And just before we do take a break, I think it's fascinating to see those old photos, because when you watch a modern drama, the cinematography, the beauty, the colors, they look so fascinating and they look so kind of liberating, but sometimes it's a little bit anachronistic, and we're projecting modern values back onto the past when it wasn't all like that. And you see those old photos and you think, well, That was their way of life, and
Yeah.
that's how they did things, and it was successful for 500 years.
Sure.
But I think it's more important to understand it as it was rather than we might want it to be from today's
Of course.
position.
We can't put today's standards on it whatsoever, I don't believe. Kay's saying, I love all those vintage photos, beautiful insights into the past lives. It's such a shame that we didn't have photography for like thousands of years, because that would be amazing. Because paintings are great,
Yeah.
but they are usually maybe someone who's aristocratic or the royalty sitting in a chair. You know, you don't often get the real feel and vibe of it. I love seeing those black and white pics.
Me too. It's really good to actually go and look at them and see it for what it was. And Korean paintings, of course, of that time, they didn't have perspective. They were all 2D.
Yes.
So that idea of perspective, which came in sort of the Renaissance in Italy, 1500s, that idea of perspective didn't really sort of come to Korean art. So it is very flat, is very 2D. It's just a cultural
That's
observation.
an interesting point that I'd never realised. But you're right, they're all so very two-dimensional.
Yeah.
Kay also mentions many countries, though, did have royal courts and courtesans and kings with mistresses or concubines or whatever they were called. Yeah, it's not limited to Korea, that the king having his pick of the bunch, basically.
No, and I think that's an important thing to recognise. It could seem like I'm sort of ragging on Korea or something,
Yes.
but this would have happened in societies all over the world. And also polygamy, some traditions and cultures do still allow it. I
Yes.
mean, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Muslim cultures, you're allowed to possess up to 4 wives, providing that you have the means to do so.
Sure, and as we were saying, it is not really accurate to put today's standards onto what was happening hundreds of years ago. You know, people had different ways of thinking and whatnot. You got a message as well?
I do, from Hartley Saunders. Okay, I knew I'd seen another drama related to this story, Hartley says. Warrior Baek Dong-soo from 2011, set in the time of Prince Sado. And yeah, I think that's it. When you start watching more and more of these saguks, these period dramas, you get closer to the Korean experience because they're often reoccurring characters, reoccurring themes, and they sort of speak to traditional things. It would be us like watching sort of, I don't know, King Arthur and things like this, and Lancelot and Henry VIII.
The Tudors.
we want to sort of know and learn about them,
Jackie Wong also shouting out to one thing I noticed. Look at the court lady's hair. Wow, I love those hairstyles. Like a lot of that long hair not being cut at all and just put up in plaits and whatnot, which you'll also see a lot, I think, in the historical dramas, right?
The Pongmori, the Sangdu. That was until 1894 with the Gabo reforms. There was an edict in Korean society saying that men then had to have short hair. So there was actual laws changing around that time. This drama, it plays out this idea of this secret organization going on in the court, this 국녀들이 비밀 조직, like a secret court women's organization. I think the translation might be of that.
Are we talking like James Bond style?
Think kind of like Illuminati or Freemasons or that kind of thing, but operated by the court women, and they were working sort of the inner mechanisms of the court and intrigue, and they were trying to set off stories and plots for their own benefit, but also to prolong the thing. Now, it has great dramatic impact, and it sounds so fascinating. Even hearing your voice, Pete, you're like,
I'm intrigued.
this is...
I remember some saguks where that has been the plot, like maybe the king's mother or something is really pulling the strings in the background without anyone else knowing, kind of thing.
I think there's definitely influential figures that do these things, but this idea that there was like a 비밀 조직, a secret organization. I spoke to a couple of historians about this while I was researching this show, and they they said to me bluntly, no, there's no evidence for it. I mean, it sounds nice, but it also, there might be sort of elements of, well, let's kind of blame the women or give them power. I'm not sure what happens, but it really works in the drama, and it adds to it. But there's not sort of any historical evidence I know of, having spoken to some historians of the time.
Interesting. So in terms of this drama then, which my wife would only watch the 3-minute clips but end up crying many times. It really affected her emotionally and she loved it, she said. Is there a lot of fact in this one? a lot of fiction?
Well, the characters of Zhongzhou, King Zhongzhou, absolutely fact. And the eulogy that he wrote to his courtesan, his concubine, this is all there. But how it actually plays out, it's really dramatized. And this is not a criticism, because it is a drama.
Sure, it's not a documentary.
No, it's not a documentary. It's not a history book. But a lot of it is overtly dramatized, especially perhaps the relationship, the lifestyles inside the court, the beauty. It's really played up, and it's done for modern tastes and modern acceptability, because you know that if it had elements of historical truth, many people would find it uncomfortable, or they wouldn't want to watch it because of the way that certain characters would be treated.
Sure, like we're talking about before, the standards we have today, it just wouldn't run, like it would be too counter to those, right?
Absolutely. So it's a modern retelling. So you do have these, just to recap, you do have these true figures that did exist, but the way that the narrative is played out, the elements of the Red Sleeve, the Secret Women's Organization, even the genuineness of that love between the two characters, and how some historians have mentioned to me that was kind of overplayed as well. So it's a great drama. I watched some of it as well, and I was gripped by it. People in my family love it. Are you actually learning what really happened at the time? No, but it can be a bridge. Remember, we sort of talked about this crossover from K-pop stars to dramas?
Yes.
This drama can serve as a bridge into going and understanding the real history and going to look at the photos and reading the books.
Yeah, that's like the next step, right? And I guess the thing with truth and staying true to the fact is that I think as a viewer, you really want to believe it's true, right? It just adds an extra layer to that drama or movie, right? If you think that was real.
I doing some reading on this and research when I do sort of dramas in Hallyu with these Saguks, Pete, I can't speak for Korean people, but I get this idea, this sense, and this is in the literature as well, that when some Korean people will watch these dramas, they know they're not watching history. They're watching a K-drama, and we know what K-dramas are. They're watching a K-drama carried out in hanboks.
Yes.
And that's what they're watching. And so there's not always this desire. They're not being tricked. Korean people generally know what's going on, but it's just warm, it's reassuring, and exceptionally well made. The acting's really good in this, and so it does what it's meant to do.
Yeah, and as long as people enjoy it and they realise that, I don't think there's any harm. I mean, there was the drama that we mentioned just briefly a few weeks ago, Snowdrop, which was completely canned for its historical inaccuracies, whereas this one, everyone seems to just enjoy it for what it is.
This is what I find interesting, because Snowdrop's Seolganghwa, the one with
Jung Hae-in as well as
Jisoo from Blackpink, also a tragedy with a death with one of the cast members of that recently. That had a scene, like a couple of small scenes that people didn't quite like, and there were petitions to have it cancelled, to taken off air. And it's not using any real figures. It's not using sort of like an actual King Jongjo or people like this. And it says it's all dramatized. And so for me personally, it's really interesting to see how much controversy something like Seolganghwa, despite it being a drama, and whereas the Red Sleeve receives nothing like that, despite it all being, again, dramatized. So I wonder, why does that happen? Is it driven by sort of fans or anti-fans of various things? Is it because Seolganghwa was more closer to the modern age with democratization and that? But there doesn't seem to always be any logic to it. There doesn't have to be logic to it, but yeah.
It's a good thing to ponder upon until we see you again next week, David. As ever, thank you so much for our deep dive into the Red Sleeve. We'll see you next Monday. You can listen to Monday's segment Now and Then with David Tizard every Monday from 10 a.m. KST on #DailyK.